Hello, in this video we will discuss what are our options if a method is throwing multiple types of checked exceptions. Until now we've only worked with the person class constructor, which was throwing a single checked exception type. We will now see what will happen if we add one more exception type to the constructor, and how we can handle a situation like that. We will continue with our previous example, but we'll add one more checked exception type to the throws clause of the constructor. We can add as many exception types in the throws clause of a method or a constructor as we want, even if the method is not actually throwing them. We are adding the IO exception. This is a major class in the checked exceptions hierarchy in Java. IO exception is a built-in Java exception. IO exception and its subclasses are exceptions related to the file system problems. We will discuss that later in the course when we are studying about working with the file system. For now, it's just important that our constructor of the person class will throw one more checked exception type, which will lead to the following situation to the picture on the right. We've already taken care of invalid person argument checked exception, but now we have another unhandled checked exception type to think about. We have four options here. Number one is again adding this exception to the throws declaration of the main method, which we will not discuss. The second option is to add another catch clause that will be responsible for catching the IO exception type. And now we have one catch block for each of the exceptions that the person constructor might throw. When an exception is thrown, each catch statement is inspected from top to bottom. If a match is found between the catch clause and the exception type, this block of code is executed. After one catch statement is executed, the others are skipped, and execution continues below the last catch block. We can line up as many catch statements as we want. That said, we should consider something when we have more than one catch clause. It is important to remember that exception subclasses must come before any of their superclasses. This is because a catch clause that uses a superclass will catch exceptions of that type plus any of its subclasses. Thus, a subclass will never be reached if it came after its superclass. So in this example we've added one more catch clause which should catch exception. And below are the two catch clauses that we've had earlier for IO exception and invalid person argument checked exception. But since exception is a superclass of both, we will never get to those catch clauses, and their respective blocks of code will be unreachable. We can still use all three catch blocks, but the sequence should be different. Now everything is fine. We try to catch IO exception and invalid person argument checked exception, and if none of those occur, we will catch exception or any of its subclasses. That said, in our example, if we try to add another catch clause for a subclass of IO exception between the catch clauses of IO exception and exception, the same problem will occur. So again, subclasses should come first in multiple catch blocks. Now, a relatively logical question would be, is there a shorter way if I want to execute the same block of code for multiple exception types? Yes, there is. You can use multi-catch clauses added in Java 7. This is our third option. The multi-catch feature allows multiple exception classes to be listed in the same catch clause separated by the OR operator. The multi-catch block will be executed if its corresponding try block throws any of the exception types listed in the multi-catch clause or any of their subclasses. So the code we wrote from the previous slide would look like this. The syntax is short and concise, and perfect if you want to execute the same block of code for more than one exception type. Let's examine what is happening here. We've listed the two types of exceptions we want to catch, separated by a single OR operator. Looks fine. Multi-catch clause can save a lot of space and produce cleaner code in some situations. There are some rules we would like to follow, as always. if some of the exceptions specified in the multi-catch block are in the same exception tree, we must catch the superclass. To handle exception from the same hierarchy separately, you should use separate catch blocks. In other words, if you have exception as a class in a multi-catch clause, any of its subclasses will result in a compilation error. If you have IO exception, any of its subclasses will result in a compilation error. Second, all exceptions must be separated with the OR operator. That's a must. This is the only syntax that allows us to use a multi-catch clause. Third, all exceptions has a single variable name, not separate ones. In our example, if you ignore the compilation error there is, you would still not be able to name IO exception, for example Z, or invalid person argument checked exception with some other name. All exceptions share the same name, in our case E. Exception parameter specified in the multi-catch block is effectively final. This is in the case you want to assign some other type of exception in the catch block. There is something called rethrowing, which we will talk about in one of the next videos. That was all about catching multiple exceptions and the tools you can use to manage them. See you in the next video.
For more details, check the link in the description. Learn with Whizlabs. Success certified.